I'm going to get all these pop-ups out of the way. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here this afternoon. My name is Alex Weidenhammer. I am the Director for Workforce Training, and I'm joined here by my colleague Levon Nelson, Senior Director for Workforce Training, for the FY25 Non-Credit Workforce Training Initiative Technical Assistance Session. So to start off here, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and put your name and college in the chat. Go ahead and say hi to everybody. For today, so a lot of this is going to be, if you're working on the FY24 grant currently, there's going to be a lot of information that we're going to be reviewing from that grant. Not a lot has changed for the FY25 rendition, but there are a few things that we have kind of tweaked and have some additional comments on. So we're going to make note of that as we go through the session itself. And at any time, if you have any questions or answers, since this isn't like a webinar, so no one's muted, you can feel free to unmute yourself, ask questions, put something in the chat, or you can wait towards the end, however you'd like to do that. We want to kind of keep this conversational as we're going along. So to begin, starting off with the funding overview. So we have a total of $5 million, which has been appropriated to the ICCB to administer non-credit grants, which also support non-credit training, and then also business solution initiatives to employers. This is the same objective as FY24, and we're continuing that work as we move into FY25. Same as last year, only one grant application is permitted per community college, but as you note here, the maximum amount that a grantee can apply for is $105,000. So we've added on an additional $5,000 for FY25. One thing you also note is that the grant period has switched. We went from starting in April during FY24, we're switching over to the calendar cycle to kind of get things a little more consistent kind of on our end. So the current for FY25 current grant period is going to be January 1st, 2025 to December 31st of 2025. Note again, applicants may subcontract for your services that enhance the program services or reduce barriers for eligible employers or students. And once again, as always, internal collaboration is always highly encouraged. So the target entities have remained the same for FY25, employers being one of the biggest ones, providing business solutions and other training needs to local employers that you're working with a emphasis or a focus on small to medium sized manufacturers. Individuals must be 18 years or older, and they must be leading into employment for high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations. One thing we noted earlier on the first webinar is that in-demand occupations, it really kind of entails what is needed within your local market. That's what considered an in-demand occupation would be. So anything within your area, if there's an employer who's needing training needs, that's the target that you want to focus on there. And then once again, for those individuals, anyone who is considered underserved in education or in workforce system is also another population we are looking to target with this grant. And then also incumbent workers. So for local employers who want to provide specialized training to their workforce and also upskilling them in other tasks as well. So a lot of, like I said, remaining the same as last year, we're continuing a lot of the same work, same population focus moving forward in FY25. So now we get to the grant objectives and activities. Once again, this is going to be a lot of a refresher here. And I'll move let me minimize this real quick, get my face out of the way. Okay, so first and foremost, once again, expanding non-credit program offerings is one of the major goals of this grant. So once again, you should be aiming to prioritize significantly in-demand and emerging occupations for programming to be built, expanded, or supported through this grant. So for FY25, we know that a lot of the work that you might be doing might not be, if you're working in FY24, might be continuing to FY25, but we're looking to see how how your programs could be expanded or further supported currently in FY25. But you can also build new programs as well. So there's a little bit of flexibility with that as well. So offering business solutions to employers is the second objective. So that's in addition to providing customized training, community colleges, you all offer different business solutions to employers. We've seen in FY24, I mean, there's a full spectrum of different services that the colleges are giving to employers. So this could include quality safety audits, training workshops, essential employability skills, DEI training, contract procurement assistance, etc. We know there's a lot of flexibility with this non-credit grant, and that's how we've kind of designed it to be, because we want to make sure that we're giving you all the funds so you can give what the employers need within your area. Um, and just to reiterate, colleges should prioritize small businesses with 500 employees or less, as well as minority or women-owned businesses for these business solutions. We mentioned earlier that this is just you should prioritize. That doesn't mean you're necessarily stuck with working just primarily with small businesses if they have 500 employees or less. I think Levon, you mentioned earlier, if there's an employer who happens to have you know needs in your area and you're looking to serve them, that's acceptable as well. So we
Right.
just look.
Just, yeah,
Mhm.
you're right. It's just that you should first try to do everything you can, for small and medium sized, if you're able to engage them in, but if you have an employer that's larger than that, and, it's someone that you've really been trying to work with or that sort of thing, you're not kept from working with them. It's just that, as Alex said, the priority is 500 employees or less.
Mhm. Right. And then the third objective is increasing the affordability for non-credit trading for students. So one of the main objectives of this grant is to break down the barriers for students looking to enter the workforce through these non-credit programs. So these can be students who are low income, they're or underemployed, or otherwise underrepresented in the sector in which training is being offered. So one thing that we've had a lot of questions in FY24 about offsetting costs for students to participate in non-credit programs. That's perfectly allowable with this grant. That's one of the major objectives that we're looking to make sure that we can get as many people who don't have the opportunity to enter these programs, to give them the opportunity to pay for their schooling. The activities may offset costs of training. You can also create non-credit apprenticeship programs through the non-credit grant, and then also increase the efficiencies for sustaining the affordability of your program moving forward as well. Okay, and so there are 4 major required activities, and these are once again the same as last year. To one, offer non-credit training. So the funds are with this grant, you're required to utilize the funds specifically for non-credit training, and it must not supplant current offerings. The funding should be utilized for new training or expanding, that's the key word there, expanding, like I mentioned earlier, expanding, building upon your current offerings that you have at your college. So this can, like I said earlier, this can include customized training for incumbent workers, training for new entrants to the workforces, but it has to culminate in industry recognized credential as well. And then also, once again, training must be for an in-demand or an emerging field. And the in-demand, once again, can specifically apply to your local college district as well.
And can I go back to the credential thing? Because
Yeah.
for those of you, and we talked about this morning, for those of you that were on our last operational call, we talked about this whole credential area and certification, and there were some questions around certifications of completion. We had some colleges say that they can't use that term because at their school it's considered a credit term, and they use certificate for achievement or certificate of participation. To us, for our purposes in how we are going to count everything, that all will be collapsed into one category. And not everyone is going to get an industry recognized credential. So that's not an absolute. So, it's just one of the credentials that they might obtain, if they did a non-credit welding, if they did non-credit phlebotomy, if they, any of those, and they take a test, they get an industry recognized, or they have to, get a license. That is, that's also separate. And in your report for FY24, you'll see where you can capture those different types of certificates or credentials. We're trying to see what, in the first year or so, what you're actually giving out there, if that makes sense. Any questions on that?
Nope. All right. Thanks, Levon.
Yeah.
Move on here to. All right, once again, articulating non-credit to credit transitions. We know that a lot of you already are doing this, but this is one of the focuses of the grant for FY25 is to articulate or map that pathway for students to transition from the non-credit programs to credit without the duplication of courses or competencies. In FY24, we are looking to we were looking to get a consultant to begin working with the colleges. So if there's, and we're going to continue to do that here into FY25, find a consultant that can provide technical assistance in that specific area. So as soon as we have an update on that, we will be sure to share that with all of you as well.
But you're able to go ahead
Yeah.
and do what you have, because most of you have a good idea, a process or something that you're doing non-credit to credit. It makes sense. We've got them all mapped out in a chart, so we know you're already all doing something. So we encourage you to continue. Now, some of these might take longer if you're trying to develop a program or something. So you may actually be carrying this over into FY25. If you have to go through committees and, you know, all the things you have to do at the community college, get approval from us, whatever you're doing. So we understand that. And then we can go ahead if you need, we can create cohorts of like programs if you would all like that. We just need a sense. But like Alex said, we're exploring whether we really do need a consultant to come in and work with you. You know, so we're gonna let us know. You can drop us an email or something, or tell us in the chat, you need a consultant, you don't need a consultant, you know. You're okay, moving forward, you're stuck, you know.
Okay, and then for the third, so for FY25, we are continuing to participate in the statewide Behind Every Employer campaign.
Through June.
I'm sure all
Through June at this point.
through June. Yeah, I was getting ready to ask because I knew that
sorry.
the contractors. No, you're fine. I remember you mentioned that during the first meeting. So through June of 2025, we're going to be working with Behind Every Employer campaign. And once again, there's just a brief introduction of what the Behind Every Employer campaign is.
And we did talk once again at the operational meeting about this and some concerns the college has had around this campaign. And so I had said, or Alex had said, one of us said, we'd put out a quick little jot form and ask you a couple questions about the types of leads you're getting and that sort of thing. But we're going to hold off a quarter. I was thinking that the contract aligned with the grant year, but it goes a quarter beyond. So we'll wait a quarter, and then we will send just like a few questions, like how many leads are you getting? Have they been fruitful? You know, just some basic things like that. So we can make some decisions moving forward, because you all expressed some very clear ideas you had for marketing your non-credit programs. Sorry, Alex, I'm jumping in.
Oh, no, you're fine. I think it's important to highlight, we want to make sure that with this campaign that it is providing, you know, the required services to all of you as well. So I think it's important that we're going to get that survey out to everybody, like Levon mentioned here, once it gets closer towards that June date, I believe. So we can kind of check in and see how the Behind Every Employer campaign has worked in FY24 for you, or if there's other ideas or other sort of strategies we could start employing for FY25.
I look for it in January.
January.
Yep.
Okay, and then for this slide here, this is just, once again, general information just about the Behind Every Employer campaign. The advisory committee of business leaders formed by the Coalition of Adult Basic Education, COABE, and then Skills USA, to strategically connect companies with educational providers across the state. There will be colleges required to participate in professional development regarding the campaign. I don't know if we have any plan for FY25 or not. We'll have to check in with the full capacity marketing. They're the marketing company that is behind every employer. But as soon as we have any updates on any additional meetings, we'll be sure to let all of you know as well. And then the link to their webpage is also here on the slide as shown. So if you want to ask any, or, you know, look into the information that's on the website, kind of explore the page itself, you can go ahead and click on that link there as well. Okay, and then for the fourth and final required activity is the non-credit data collection. So with this grant, since it's been, I think, was it 2012 was the last time there was non-credit funding?
Yeah, from the state, yes.
From the state. So what we're looking to really do is start making sure that we are collecting as much data as possible to show the impact of non-credit programs throughout the state. What that does is if we can show how many employers that you're serving, how many students that you're serving, the number of credentials and people entering the workforce. That's all really important data to show the legislature. So when it comes time for the request for funding for these types of programs, we have all the data that we need to make a case for non-credit. So for the required activity, you should be utilizing grant sources to bolster your collection and tracking of all your non-credit data elements. That can include the upgrading of your systems, your registration systems, bolstering your staff capacity in your programs as well, and more, right? For the ICCP, will continue to work with colleges over the grant period to identify more additional data elements to be added to the N1 collection as well. And then aside from the bolstering of non-credit data collection, if you go to pages 5 and 6 of the NOFO, there is an even longer list of more allowable activities that you can do for the FY24 non-credit grant as well. And I
Yeah,
believe on the next, yeah,
no,
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, I think maybe it is somewhere else in here though. But you could also, we're also talking about forecasting, registration, that sort of thing too. And I think Alex hits that in a little bit, but I just wanted to put a reminder here.
Yeah, I think it's yeah, next slide here.
Oh,
So
okay.
once again, yeah, beat me to it. So for the non-credit data collection and also the forecasting infrastructure, that's one thing you can utilize the non-credit funds for. Registration platforms. We put this example in here, the setup of smart classrooms. So we had a question, construction projects are not allowed, so you're not allowed to go out and build like a building specifically for non-credit, anything like that. But for the installation or of certain products for the non-credit grant, that is allowable. So smart classrooms would be allowable there. But one thing to note is that during the life of the grant, say if you did implement a smart classroom, you would only be able to use it for non-credit students and non-credit purposes only. And then one thing to note here, we want to give everyone a reminder on the budget page for any of these types of purchases for data collection, for the forecasting, if you're installing any sort of equipment, make sure to note that in detail on the narrative portion of your budgets. Once we go into the reading process as we're going through, this isn't a competitive grant, so we're not looking. I mean, we are looking at the information that you provide in the narrative, but we're also really looking intently at the budgets and making sure everything's allowable, how it corresponds with your scope of work. That's a really important part of it. So the more information that we have on your budget portion, your narrative portion of your budgets, the easier it is for us to assess that information quickly.
Yep, and we're not comparing you with the other. We're looking strictly when we look at, I'll pick one, College of DuPage. When we look at colleges of DuPage, we're just looking at College of DuPage. Does it make sense what you want to do? Does your budget align? We're not comparing you to Shawnee or Lincoln Land, because this is supposed to be specific to what you need in your district for non-credit. And then the other thing, we may touch on this later, but I couldn't remember. And thinking about some of the other allowable activities, you also, let's say you have a non-credit training program already on your campus, but it's not going well, or you need more students, or it needs to be updated. This allows you to buy equipment and supplies for non-credit training programs on campus, because that's one of the components, your own, training.
Oh, and then Wendy had a question there in the
Yeah.
chat.
Okay, Wendy, Alex had asked me to watch the chat, and of course I wasn't watching it. Okay.
Well, it popped up there for a second. I just can get all of it.
I can't find it now. Wendy, you wanted to know if you could do an a subscription to.
I think it's LinkedIn.
Yeah, yes. I think that's legitimate. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions about allowable activities or anything like that before I can continue? Okay, so now we're going to go to the grant goals and the outcomes. So for just the same as FY24, these numbers that are going to be entered once you fill out your application, there's a template that we're going to provide where you're going to enter this information. Oh, Corrine, social media campaigns, are those allowable? I would say.
I don't know
Yes.
why not. I mean,
Yeah.
what, give us a bit more information on that, can you, Corrine? Yeah, I think it's a marketing tool to reach employers.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing it to, through the non-credit side of the house. So I don't see a problem with it. Not quite sure where you would show it in your budget. Um, might have to think about that. Maybe miscellaneous. I'm not sure. I'm not sure it would be a supply. It could be contractual if you contracted with someone to do it. But, if if you want to do that and you run into an issue of where to plug it in, just reach out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, and then for the grant goals and outcomes, we have the two levels, the participant level and then also the programmatic outcomes. When you are filling out I believe it's the project design template for the application, you're going to want to enter your plan numbers for FY25. So this is going to include the number of non-credit students to be trained, and then also the percentage of non-credit student completers employed 2 quarters after completion. And then also the overall programmatic outcomes, the planned number of employers to be served through FY25, the planned number of non-credit trainings to be offered, and then also the planned number of new services programs provided to the employers as well. Okay, and then
Alex, what does it from X to Y mean? I can't remember. Why do we have that? They're from X to Y.
Services provided to from X to Y. I can't quite remember off the top of my head there. I'll have to look back at that.
So don't worry about it. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Someone had a question.
Got that out there. Okay, and then for the other information collected on a quarterly and annual basis, we're also looking at the JOT form that we're using for FY24. We are planning on continuing to use that for FY25 as well. Each quarter, we're making slight tweaks to it, just so we can better aggregate data and pull that information out easily to us. So it's not really going to change the content, but maybe the form of the JOT form will change a little bit. But we're still going to be looking for, employer names, the identify if employer is a minority or woman business owned, and then also the industry sector that the employer belongs to, the services provided to the employers by program, and that's just a quick general description, the training program names, and then also the certificates or credentials completed by the students, and then the overall student demographics as well.
And I had a question come in, and Alex, I don't know if that one went to you also or not, around employer names. If you had to submit employer names with your application, no. When you work with them, that's when you enter them into the JOT form when you're reporting out. We did ask for specific employer names for the amendment because that was supposed to be like someone that you really wanted to work with, but you didn't have the money for, and this gave you the opportunity. So we did want a specific name there, but that was only for the amendment funds. But for this particular grant, no, you do not give us the names up front. You're not going to know the employers you could potentially work with. So, I mean, we're not asking that. This is when you submit your quarterly reports.
And I think we mentioned on the last call as well, you might plan to work with one employer, but then they might back out. Or maybe you were going to provide a specific service to an employer, but then they changed what they wanted. So, those variables can change. So we don't require that information up front. That's just on a quarterly basis as well. So it's the actual employers that you would work with or that you have worked with during that quarter. Okay, and I think grant goals and outcomes there, that wraps that up. Okay, for the grant deliverables, once again, the grant has changed to the calendar cycle. So it's January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025. So here's a list of all the quarters, the grant period that coincides with, and then also the due date of that quarterly report as well. And that's mentioned over here in that table. So for the deliverables, once again, it's very similar to FY24. Overall deliverables is to carry out the proposed scope of work as aligned with the objectives of this opportunity that we mentioned earlier, the 4 main ones, to carry out and participate in all the required activities. And aside from the monthly operational meetings that we will have, there may be other meetings that we require you to participate in as requested as those come along. One thing also, and kind of going back to why we're collecting all the data and all the information about the non-credit grant, is we require everybody to submit one success story from an employer and one success story from a student by by December 30th of 2025, because once again, that's important information that we can bring to state the case for continuing the non-credit funding when we go to do our request for funding from the legislature. For the required programmatic and fiscal reports, so once again, the programmatic report is housed in JOT form, so that doesn't need to be sent to these two emails listed here. When we get the report, that will come directly to us. We get a notification, we can go in and view that. So you don't have to worry about sending that to an additional email. But for the fiscal report that you have to submit, you're going to want to submit those to my email directly, which is listed there, and then also the iccb.noncredit email as well. And so the reporting templates and other instructions we made available to all of you at an additional meeting. Oh, am I seeing the grant? I think has my slide changed yet, Levon, or is it
No.
lagging behind? I see. Maybe give it 1 second here. I was doing that this morning too. Goals and outcomes. Has it switched yet?
No, it went the other way. Are you trying to go forward?
Well, I'm on grant deliverables right now. Is it showing that slide? Okay.
It's still showing grant deliverables.
Okay, that's the one I'm finishing up on here. Okay.
Okay.
I just don't know because I can't see what I've been seeing. So once again, the JOT form, we will have the new edition once that's ready to go for FY25. We'll send that out to everybody, and then I'll also follow up with the fiscal report as well. Okay, now we get to the application itself. So for the application, all parts of it have to be submitted by the deadline, which is October 15th of 2024 by 11:59. You must use the templates that are provided, and there's links within this PowerPoint that go directly to the website itself. If you haven't already got access to those links, you'll be able to find them through this PowerPoint as well. For the submission, you're going to once again want to submit that directly to my email, which is listed there, and then the non-credit email as well. And the 4 parts of the application are the GATA exempt grant application, project overview, which is the template with information that you'll just have to fill out, the application narrative, and then the uniform budget. Okay,
and can I briefly explain? So for those of you that don't know what GATA is, it's the government. It's the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act that we follow, and non-GATA obviously means it's not but that is for this specific instance. You are community colleges. The grant is only for community colleges, and it's state funding. So in that case, it's called non-GATA. It's called GATA exempt or non-GATA. So you might see that term that applies specifically to this type of grant. And technically, we also don't have to do a NOFO, but we just did it because you're all used to that language and the way of responding. We could have just sent you like quote an application. We kept the framework just because that's how we're doing it, and it just seemed we were more consistent.
And then for that GATA exempt grant application, it's a very simple document. I believe it's maybe 1, maybe 2 pages. The first page is shown here, just the general information there, and that's provided here at this link on the ICCB Grant Opportunities website or page. And then the project overview template, which is the same as last year, is going to have 2 sections, which is going to be the cover page, which is going to have more general information about who's overseeing the grant and things like that. And then also the bottom portion is going to be the, I believe, course offerings, if I remember that's the title correctly, where you're actually going to input the information of what programs, what non-credit programs you're going to be expanding on, building, creating during the course of the grant as well. And then once again, that is linked right there at the bottom of the page there. And for the narrative, so the narrative it's a short narrative. It's no more than 5 pages, double space, 12-point font. And within we're going to cover the actual narrative sections here in a minute. Charts and graphs are included in the page limitation. We highly encourage you all to use charts and graphs just to make it easier for us to read the information. Like I said, we're going to get into the narrative sections here a little more closely in a second. And then the final component is the uniform budget, which I'm sure everyone's pretty used to filling out the uniform grant budget template. Templates provided there. So one thing, like I said earlier, we want to kind of stress is making sure that you're putting in very detailed information into the narrative section on the budget pages. Each line item that you go to, if you have consulting or personnel, there's a narrative box down at the bottom. Like I said earlier, it makes it a lot easier for us to assess the allowability, the reasonability of the costs if we have more information in those. So if you, I'm trying to think of an example. If you say you're going to buy supplies and you just put one thing on there and there's no explanation, then we have to kind of come back to everybody and say, well, what exactly are you buying, right? So the more information that we have in that narrative kind of makes it easier on our end. And then we actually get to the narrative section. So I'm not going to read this all verbatim, but there are a number of components that need to be touched on in your narrative. So first off is a statement need, which is just going to show the justification for the program. So like the industry focus, labor market information in your area, and so on and so forth. The work plan, which is going to clearly describe the project activities, the timeline, the people responsible for each activity. We kind of stress for this portion, you can create just a simple table for this. You don't have to write everything out narratively in paragraph form like that. It's a lot easier if you just build like a chart for that. But within that, you're going to want to include all the required activities must be addressed within that work plan. So once again, offering non-credit training, articulate non-credit transitions, so on and so forth. And then activities where other partners are involved should also include a brief description of the role each partner will play in the grant project. So the partner, if anyone's partnering with somebody for this grant, that information is going to go within your work plan as well. And then the overall impact, so the benefits to your non-credit program on your institution, your community, employers, and students need to be addressed. And then also the scalability and the replicability as well. And then just a general reminder for the application narrative, make sure that everything is organized, clear, understandable, proofread, and edited. And we also, once again, just stress that it's okay to use charts, bullet points for information. And then I think that covers the narrative sections. Oh, yeah. So just some important reminders about the application itself. Make sure that the application in full is submitted by the deadline. It has to be submitted by the deadline to be considered. Once it's not a competitive grant, but we have to make sure that everything abides by that timeline, that 11:59 on October 15th. You should make sure within your narrative that all the elements are clearly addressed. And we strongly encourage using headers to address all the elements or some consistent form of response delineation. So one thing that I kind of suggest is, you could take the headers directly from the NOFO and use those within your narrative as well. So one thing to note is that when you submit your application, I will send you a receipt of confirmation just to let you know that we have received it, we have everything. However, applicants will not be notified if their items are missing from their application. So once again, just make sure when you're going to hit that submit button that you take one extra look there, make sure everything's there. And then applicants must use the templates. Like I said, those have all been linked throughout the PowerPoint presentation on our website as well. And then paper copies of the application are also not permitted. So everything is going to be online. And then from there, okay, and then funding deadline. So once again, we've changed over to a different grant cycle from January 1st to December 31st. So the dates have changed. So this is very important. So the grant funds must be obligated by December 31st of 2025. Goods and products must be ordered by December 31st, 2025, and then received by February 28th of 2025. All services for the grant must be rendered by December 31st, and then grant funds must be liquidated by December 31st of 2025 as well. And then we recently changed our budget modification due date. This is an agency-wide change here. They're all due by November 1st of 2025 for this grant as well. And then one thing we want to make sure to note too is that there is a bit of overlap for FY24 and FY25. So for January and March, that's going to be the first quarter of the FY25 grant and then the fourth quarter of the FY24 grant. So we just have a few months of overlap there as well. So when it comes to the due dates for FY24, you're going to want to make sure to refer to the dates on that NOFO for that grant. And then I think that's, yeah, questions and answers. So here's my contact information. Levon and I are always here to help you all out whenever you need it. If you need to send an email, schedule a phone call, have a quick Zoom meeting, that's what we're here for. We want to make sure we can be available for everybody. So there's my contact information there. And Levon, I don't have yours on here, but if you have any questions during the application process, be sure to reach out to us. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about anything that was covered during the meeting? So I'll probably go ahead and stop sharing here for a minute. I'll look at the chat here real quick and see if there's anything that I missed in there. Oh, Green, yeah, I did. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you saw
I was gonna
something on there, so I'll let you answer that, and then I just have two questions, so answer.
Sure, yeah. Yeah, we are going to be posting an FAQ. So any questions that are answered, we're going to make those available on the ICCB Grant Opportunities webpage as well. So as those come in, we'll be updating that on a very regular basis. So you said, Karina, you had some other questions too?
No.
Or
No,
somebody have
it's
questions?
me, Gina from
Oh,
Community College.
oh, Gina,
Yeah.
there you go. Okay.
Yeah, both of my questions are actually on FY24, if you don't mind. One is
sure.
the JOT form that will be like due at the end of next month. Is there a new one that's coming out? Because when I clicked on the link of the old one, it tells me it's not available.
So they're currently doing a few tweaks, our data and analytics. They ended up shutting off the page just for a little bit while they're working on that. So it will be back up and running here. I think October 4th is when they're going to be finished working on that.
Okay, that's perfect. And then I had budget modifications. I know we had sent one last week. Do we get like a approval if that budget modification is okay, or?
Yeah, I'll take a look back at that. I might have missed that in my email there. I'll take a look at that here in a few minutes here, and then I'll get that right back to you after I look at it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about the FY25 grant or anything FY24? No? Okay. Well, thank you all for joining me this morning. I think Levon might have dropped out there. Well, thanks for joining us here today for FY25. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.